Hello, welcome back to Dukascopy TV after the holidays. Well, we're going to thrust you straight into the action as we're looking at what everyone's talking about at the moment, or one of the things everyone's talking about, and that's inflation and deflation. We've got what I hope is someone who knows everything about this, Dr. Frank Hollenbeck of the International University of Geneva. Welcome back to the studio.
It's good to be here.
Now, Frank, there's a growing fear that Europe will soon be in a deflationary period. That's what a lot of people are talking about, the central banks are worried about. The IMF Managing Director, Christine Lagarde, says that the ECB should do more, called on the ECB to do more in tackling the sort of lowering inflation. There are growing rumours that the ECB may take action in its next meeting in June, could be imposing monetary easing measures such as negative interest rates on reserves, or possibly its own version of quantitative easing. Should we be panicking about deflation, do you think, Frank?
Well, there are a lot of articles at the moment talking about the calamity of deflation if it shows its nose, even for the briefest period of time. Christine Lagarde talked about the ogre of deflation. But in reality, there is no theoretical or empirical reason to fear deflation. I did an interview on this a year ago, which led to my writing an article on this particular subject back in June of last year. And there are really two main, I would say, sources of deflation. The first one comes from a general increase in the amount of goods and services available. And in this type of deflation, we have a reduction in cost. Okay, and with competition leads to lower prices. Okay, for example, the technology sector has basically thrived in this type of deflation. Okay, for the last several decades. And we also had the same thing in the 19th century, where many industries also were surviving in a deflationary environment. We had basically two periods in the United States where prices dropped 50%. Okay. Now, the second source of deflation has to do with an increase in the desire of the public or the banking sector to basically hold cash, or what we call hoarding. Okay, and let me give you a very simple example to explain this. Suppose that we have $10 and 10 apples. Okay, the price of an apple will be $1. Okay, that's the only time you don't have any excess output or excess money. Okay. Now, suppose that production cost is 80 cents, so you're making a 25% profit. Okay. And suppose all of a sudden the public decides to hoard $5. Then the money supply will go to $5. So we have $5 chasing 10 apples, so prices will go from $1 to 50 cents. Okay. Now, in this type of deflation, we have output prices going down, okay, and input prices follow. Now, if input prices go to 40 cents, then there's no problem because we're still making a 25% profit. What the Keynesians and the monetarists fear is that input prices won't adjust fast enough. In other words, they'll be stuck at 80 cents while output is being sold at 50 cents. Okay. So the monetarist and Keynesian solution is basically to have the government print $5. Okay. Now, the problem with this is that the printing is distortive. Okay. And the reason is because the money that's been printed will not be spent in the same areas or in the same proportions as the money that is now being hoarded. Okay. But even if the government could find the right proportions or areas, it would still lead to a misallocation, because this hoarding is really a reflection of society's desire to alter relative prices closer to what society really wants. Okay, and what we've seen like today is that by the government printing money, it's actually increased the desire to hold cash. And the reason the public prefers holding cash than consuming or investing, okay, is because the printing of money has distorted prices, has distorted relative and absolute prices, so that actually holding cash is the preferred choice to consuming or investing. If we did not have fractional reserve banking, okay, then holding cash would not change the money supply, or would have a relatively small impact on the change in the money supply. Okay, and if we had 100%. If we eliminated fractional reserve banking, then credit would be extended at the same pace as slow-moving savings. So we wouldn't have the booms, we wouldn't have the malinvestments that come from the booms, and therefore we wouldn't have the desire to hold cash that must occur from the bust phase of the business cycle. In other words, if central banks are really concerned about this type of deflation, they really should be looking at the cause. And the cause is fractional reserve banking.
Now, Frank, whilst you've been talking, for some time, this quote has been up on the back wall for our viewers. It's a recent quote from Mario Draghi, which talks about his concern at lower inflation. Just having a quick look at that, do you share his concerns?
Well, I think it's pretty clear that he's confusing the first type of deflation with the second type. The deflation in Europe is primarily due to an appreciation of the euro and a drop in food and energy prices. Okay, for some reason, they're not a problem on the way up because food and energy are excluded from core CPI, but there must be a problem on the way down. Okay, in reality, central banks should not be concerned with changes in relative prices. Okay, my view is that the people or the economists at the Bundesbank must be quietly seething. Okay, I mean, they're not blind to false excuses to indirectly monetize the Southern Bloc's debt. Okay, now Mario Draghi's whatever it takes comment actually gave Southern Bloc countries more time. Okay, yet the public sectors in most Southern Bloc countries we still have a bloated public sector. Okay, in most Southern Bloc countries, we have a continuing increase in debt to GDP ratios. Okay, and many banks in Italy and Spain are technically bankrupt. Okay, take for example Italy. The non-performing loans have gone from 5.7% to over 15%, and it's getting much worse. Okay, now we have a situation where Greece was recently able to place a 5-year bond at under 5%, and this bond was actually 8 times oversubscribed. But for me, this just shows at what point the financial sector is dependent on what I would call a Draghi put. Okay, again, the unintended consequences of his whatever it takes comment. Okay, what we have in Europe is the same thing that we have everywhere else, is that interest rates are totally distorted, which has caused all other prices to be totally distorted. Now, like you said before, is that the ECB is likely to impose negative rates on deposits, but it's going to find out, just like for the US or other central banks, that you can bring a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. Okay, and it's very likely then that the ECB will impose some type of QE. However, the ECB is somewhat limited because it can't really purchase euro government debt, because that would be basically a violation of the German constitution. One day, Germany and Southern Bloc countries, and that includes France, there's going to be a clash on what the role is of monetary policy. Okay, my view is that Germany would be wise to plan today to possibly exit the euro.
Okay, Frank. So overall, then we shouldn't be panicking.
No, not about deflation. Deflation is not a reason to panic.
Well, Frank, thank you very much for coming into the studio once again. Obviously, do check out Frank's articles. You'll be able to view them as they stand now and articles in the future. That's all for the moment here on Dukascopy TV. Stay with us. We'll be bringing you further interviews and updates throughout the day. But for now, from me and from Frank, bye-bye.